You're a boy in Sparta, and the state has already decided you might not get to live. The elders hold you up to the light. They check your limbs, they check your spine. Somewhere, an old man is deciding whether you're worth feeding. This is the moment before your name is even a name, before you're Leonidas, son of Anaxandridas, of the house of Agiad, descended, they say, from Heracles himself. You don't remember it, but it's the first test of thousands. You won't be told your royal blood and treated softly for it. You'll be told nothing, because in Sparta, a king's son bleeds the same as everyone else's. And if you can't take the beating, the bloodline doesn't matter. Here's what nobody tells you about becoming the king who was never supposed to be king, and the death that would make him immortal. You grow up in the shadow of a throne you're not supposed to sit on. Your father, King Anaxandridas, rules Sparta's Agiad line, one of two royal houses that share the crown at the same time, because Sparta, ever suspicious of power, never trusted one man with it alone. Your older half-brother Cleomenes is the heir. You are not. You're the second son. Then eventually you have a younger brother too, Cleombrotus, and between the three of you there's a quiet, permanent understanding. Cleomenes wears the crown, you wear whatever's left. So you get the thing that's actually left, the agoj. At 7, you're pulled from your mother and thrown into Sparta's brutal training system, the same one every Spartan boy endures, king's son or not. You sleep on reeds, you cut yourself from the riverbank, no blanket. And if the reeds don't cut your skin raw, you probably didn't gather enough. You're fed so little that stealing food isn't just permitted, it's expected. The actual crime is getting caught. You're 12 years old the first time you go hungry for 3 days on purpose, just to prove you can. You learn to fight before you learn most people's names. You learn to bleed quietly. You learn that crying is a currency nobody in this city will accept. And you learn slowly, painfully, that this is a gift disguised as cruelty. Because if you were the heir, they might have wrapped you in silk. Instead, they hand you a spear and tell you to become worthy of nothing, so that if you ever become worthy of everything, you'll already know how to carry it. The spear doesn't get protection, the spear gets preparation. You marry Gorgo. She's Cleomenes' daughter, your own niece. And this isn't scandal here, this is Sparta protecting its bloodline the way it protects everything. Ruthlessly, deliberately, without apology. Gorgo is quick, sharper than most men you've trained beside. When foreign envoys try to bribe her father with gold, it's Gorgo, still a girl, who tells him to send the men away before the gold corrupts him. You notice this about your wife immediately. You'll keep noticing it for the rest of your life. You don't expect to be king. You build a life around not expecting it. Then word comes that Cleomenes is dead. The details are murky, tangled, argued over even by the people who were there. Some call it madness, some call it a plot. Nobody agrees. And you learn something important in that uncertainty. In Sparta, even a king's death can vanish into rumor. You don't get closure, you get a crown instead. Roughly 9 years before the end of your story, you become King Leonidas I of Sparta. Nobody prepares you for how strange it is to rule a city that already half-raised you as a soldier. You sit beside the other king, Sparta's second throne, the Eurypontid line, always present, always watching, a permanent reminder that you were never meant to hold total power. You get used to sharing decisions. You get used to the ephors, the elected officials who can, in theory, put even a king on trial. Sparta trusts no one man completely, and slowly you realize this distrust is the whole design. It's not weakness, it's architecture. Gorgo becomes your counsel in ways most Spartan men would never admit to needing. Herodotus himself will one day write down her words, one of the only women in his entire history whose voice survives, because when someone asked her once why Spartan women were the only women in Greece who ruled their men, she answered without blinking, "Because we're the only ones who give birth to men." You laugh the first time you hear it, then you stop laughing, because you realize she means it as instruction, not a joke. You have a son, Pleistarchus. You look at him and think about the agogé waiting for him, the reeds, the hunger, the same brutal machine that made you. You don't spare him from it. That's not mercy in Sparta. Mercy is making sure he's ready. Years pass in council rooms and training yards. Sparta watches the north. Persia is a word people say carefully, like a bruise you don't want touched. Everyone in Greece knows Persia will come back. Everyone's right. Then two things happen almost at once. A new Persian king, Xerxes, gathers an invasion force so large it seems to swallow the horizon. And Sparta receives word, passed carefully, the way priests speak when they don't want to be blamed later, from the oracle at Delphi. The message, stripped of its poetry, comes down to this: either Sparta falls to the barbarian, or a Spartan king dies. You don't tell Gorgo right away. You sit with it first, alone, the way you learn to sit with hunger as a boy. Not fighting the feeling, just outlasting it. You're by now no longer young. You've spent decades absorbing pain quietly. This is just one more weight to carry without flinching. But this weight has your name on it in a way none of the others did. You feel the difference between weights that belong to your office and weights that belong to you personally. And this one settles somewhere behind your sternum and does not move. An Athenian named Themistocles has a plan. Block the Persians on land at a narrow pass called Thermopylae, while the Greek fleet blocks their ships at Artemisium, a pincer of geography against an empire too big to outmuscle any other way. Someone has to lead the land force. Sparta's the obvious answer, and you're Sparta's answer to that answer. There's a problem, and it's not strategy, it's timing. The sacred month has arrived, the Carnea festival, when Spartan law forbids the army from marching. You can't simply take Sparta's full army north. The law is the law even when an empire is coming, so you take 300 men instead. You don't choose them at random, you choose them deliberately, men who already have living sons, a detail the elders will still be repeating generations after you're gone. The reasoning is simple and merciless. If these men die, their names don't die with them. Their bloodlines continue. You're choosing which families in Sparta can afford this kind of grief, and you're old enough and have buried enough friends to make that calculation without your hands shaking. You gather roughly 7,000 allied Greeks along the way, men from a dozen cities, not just Spartans, though history will flatten this later into a cleaner, smaller story. Among them, about 700 men from Thespiae and about 400 from Thebes, whose loyalty you sense even now isn't quite as solid as the Thespians standing beside them. Gorgo asks you before you leave what you want her to do. You tell her, marry a good man and raise your son well. It's the only line of yours anyone will remember her repeating for the rest of her life. At Thermopylae, the pass is so narrow that Xerxes' enormous army can't spread out to use its numbers. For 2 days, your phalanx holds. Spartan discipline, drilled since childhood, meets Persian numbers. And the numbers lose. You watch men who trained beside you since you were boys move like a single creature, shields locked, spears forward, and for 2 days it actually works. You let yourself believe, just slightly, that it might keep working. On the 3rd day, a runner brings news that changes everything. A local man named Ephialtes has shown Xerxes' men a hidden path over the mountains, and Persian soldiers are already circling behind your position. You don't panic. You've spent your whole life training not to. You do the math instead. If everyone stays, everyone dies for nothing, the pass falls anyway, and Greece loses 7,000 men instead of a few hundred. If most of them leave now, they live to fight again, so you send them away. Most of the allied Greeks march south, alive because you told them to go. You keep your 300. The 700 Thespians choose on their own to stay and die beside you. The 400 Thebans remain too, though even now you're not entirely certain how many of them are staying by choice. Dawn on the 3rd day is quiet in the way dawns get quiet before something enormous. You've buried enough Spartans by now to know what a last morning feels like without anyone saying it aloud. You don't make a speech. Spartans aren't fond of speeches. You check your shield strap instead, you find the man to your left and you find the man to your right. And that, in Sparta, has always been the entire religion. The Persians advance and you meet them in the pass, in the space you've made your own for 2 days, in the last space you'll ever call yours at all. You're killed early, in that first crush of the 3rd day's fighting. Not at the end of some drawn-out final duel, but early, the way most men actually die in real battles, fast and without ceremony, swallowed into the noise. What happens next is almost stranger than your death. Your own men, and the Thespians beside them, throw themselves back into the worst of the fighting. Not to win, the battle's already unwinnable, but to drag your body out of Persian hands. 4 times they push back the enemy line just to keep you. Men die specifically for the right to carry your corpse instead of leaving it. The pass falls anyway. It was always going to fall. 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and however many willing Thebans were never going to outmuscle an empire. That was never the plan. The plan was time and a story, and you gave Greece both. When Xerxes walks the battlefield afterward, he finds your body among the dead, and something in your death gets under the Persian king's skin in a way the battle's outcome should not have allowed. He orders your head removed and your body impaled, an act of fury dressed as punishment, the kind of thing a king only does to an enemy who beat him even while losing. Thermopylae was not a victory, say that plainly, because history tries so hard to dress it up as one. The pass fell. The Persian army marched south. If you're measuring only the battle, Persia won, but measure the years after instead. The story of what you did at that pass travels faster than Xerxes' army does. And when the Greek fleet meets the Persians at Salamis, when the allied armies finally meet them again at Plataea, Something has changed in how Greek men walk into those fights, because they know 300 men and their king did not run from an empire, even when running was the only rational choice left. You didn't win the battle, you won something slower and stranger than that. You won the part of the story that gets told for thousands of years after the part written in the casualty count is forgotten. Somewhere, a 7-year-old boy is being lifted to the light by the elders of Sparta right now, and he has no idea that hunger and reeds and a spear he barely knows how to hold yet are building the man who will one day choose 300 fathers, walk into a mountain pass, and turn a Persian tactical victory into the most famous last stand in the history of the Western world. That's what the agoge was actually for all along. If stepping into a life like this, one built entirely out of impossible choices, is the kind of history you want to actually feel instead of just read, subscribe. There are a lot more thrones and a lot more last stands worth living through